Evan, she rasped, clutching my wrist with a strength that didn't belong in a dying woman. You're not my son. The words sliced through the quiet hospital room like broken glass. I froze, her hand trembling against my skin. The monitor beside her bed beeped in frantic rhythm, the fluorescent lights humming overhead. My brother, Craig, looked up from his phone, confusion flashing across his face. My sister, Lila, stopped mid. I roll, the nail file slipping from her fingers and clattering to the floor. I tried to smile, to calm her. Mom, it's the meds talking. You need to rest. But she pulled me closer, her breath sour with morphine. I stole you, she whispered. From a mansion in Connecticut. Your real name is Alexander Harrow. Your father owns half of New York. The monitor screamed louder now, beeping like a countdown. I wanted to tell her to stop, that she didn't know what she was saying, but her eyes, those sharp, pleading eyes, held me still. Promise me you'll find him, she said. Promise me you'll forgive me. And then, with one last exhale, she was gone. Craig moved first. He slammed me into the wall so hard the four-pole rattled. I knew it, he hissed. You were never one of us. The smell of oil and sweat clung to his shirt, the scent of the auto shop where he'd worked since high school. Get out. You don't belong here. Lila crossed her arms, her grocery store name tag still pinned to her uniform. Makes sense, she said coldly. Mom never looked at you like she looked at us. It wasn't love, it was guilt. Security dragged me out of the hospital before they even covered her body. Craig took my wallet, the $400 I'd saved for her burial. Consider it back rent for 38 years, he laughed, walking away. That night, I slept in a bus station. The next day, a shelter. For 3 months, I bounced between odd jobs, soup kitchens, and cold sidewalks, trying to make sense of a past that had dissolved overnight. Evan Burke was dead. Alexander Harrow was missing, and I was no one at all. Then, one gray morning, as I stood in line for lunch at the shelter, 2 men in suits approached. They didn't belong there. Their shoes alone probably cost more than everything I owned. Evan Burke, one of them asked, his voice precise, practiced. I hesitated. Who's asking? Roger Dane, private investigator. He nodded to the man beside him, a clean-cut attorney with silver hair. This is Michael Hale, legal counsel for the Harrow estate. The attorney opened a leather briefcase and laid a document flat on the table. My name, my real name, was printed at the top, Alexander James Harrow. Beneath it, one signature, Henry Harrow. Roger leaned closer. We've been looking for you since your mother's deathbed confession hit the news. Your biological father owns 40 commercial properties across Manhattan, worth over $2 billion. He never stopped searching for you. My heart pounded. Words, numbers, names, none of it made sense. You're saying I'm his heir? Michael nodded. His only heir. And he's dying. He wants to see you before it's too late. The world tilted. My throat burned. For 38 years I'd lived as a factory worker's son, scraping by on nothing but loyalty and lies. Now they were telling me I belonged to the richest family in the city. But before I could speak, Roger's expression darkened. He looked around the shelter, then back at me. There's something you need to know before you go to him, he said quietly. I swallowed. What? He held my gaze. 7 words. 7 words that froze every drop of blood in my body. Your father doesn't know you were stolen. Diane Burke wasn't just a desperate woman who'd stolen a child. She was my father's sister, my aunt. The woman who'd raised me, fed me, and buried her guilt beneath 38 years of lies had kidnapped her own brother's son. The empire she believed should have been hers had turned her into something worse than bitter, something dangerous. Standing in that shelter with the smell of stale coffee and rain-soaked coats, I stared at the papers that proved everything. My name wasn't Evan Burke. It was Alexander James Harrow. The Burke family I'd loved was never my family at all, and the Harrow family I'd never met had been searching for me since 1985. The storm that had started the night Diane died was still falling, and I had a sick feeling it wasn't going to stop anytime soon. Cleveland's East Side doesn't forgive easily. I grew up where the factories coughed smoke before sunrise and the streets never quite lost the scent of oil and iron. The whistle from the steel plant was our morning alarm. We lived in a duplex wedged between 2 boarded-up warehouses, a place so forgotten that pizza drivers stopped delivering after 7 p.m. But to me, it was home. Harold Burke, the man I believed was my father, was a mountain in coveralls, 6'3", built from decades of hard labor, with calloused hands that could twist a rusted bolt loose without a wrench. He'd come home from double shifts at the mill coated in a gray film of steel dust that no amount of scrubbing ever fully erased. "Hard work's the only thing that makes a man honest," he'd say, ruffling my hair with those iron hands. "Remember that, Evan. We don't got much, but we earn what we have." He died when I was 15. A crane cable snapped, 2 tons of steel dropped, and just like that, everything we'd built vanished under twisted metal. The company sent a check for $20,000 and a letter claiming no liability. Diane's hair went gray within a month. She started hunching over the kitchen table, calculator in one hand, unpaid bills in the other, whispering numbers like prayers. Craig was 18 then, already working at Miller's Auto, smelling of motor oil and cheap cologne. He had Harold's build and his temper, quick to boil, slow to cool. He dropped out of school the day after the funeral. "Guess I'm the man of the house now," he said, cracking open one of Harold's leftover beers. From then on, every night he came home louder, angrier, calling me college boy whenever I tried to read. "Books don't fix broken cars," he'd say, laughing like it hurt. Lila was 12, thin, sharp-tongued, always scheming for a better deal. She'd dig through Diane's purse when she thought no one was watching, counting crumpled bills to figure out what we could afford for dinner. By 14, she was bagging groceries at Callahan's Market under a fake age, chin high, daring anyone to doubt her. And me? I was the odd one out. Craig and Lila had Harold's dark eyes and square jaw. Mine were green. Diane said it was some old family trait, but she'd never look me in the eye when she said it. My hair was lighter, my frame thinner. I could balance a checkbook before I could drive. When the power company overbilled us, I caught the mistake and saved us $80. Diane had patted my hand, murmuring, "Smart boy," though her gaze drifted somewhere over my shoulder, to a ghost I couldn't see. After Harold died, she started drinking wine in the evenings, sitting by the window long after we'd gone to bed. Some nights she'd reach out, fingertips trembling, brushing my cheek like she was touching someone else's memory. "You look just like," she'd start, then stop. "Like your grandfather," she'd finish, voice tight and uneven. I thought she was grieving. I thought that's what loss did to people. Now I know better. She wasn't seeing my grandfather's face. She was seeing her brother's, the man whose son she'd stolen. And every time she looked at me, she was staring straight into the eyes of the life she'd destroyed. Every Sunday, I sat at our scarred kitchen table, the linoleum peeling beneath my elbows, balancing Diane's checkbook like it was a lifeline. I'd decide which bills got paid, which had to wait, and which ones required another phone call full of apologies we both knew were lies. Craig hated it. Said I was playing accountant just to feel smarter than him. Lila would smirk and call me Mom's favorite, though there was never any real affection in how Diane looked at me. If anything, it was like she handled me with invisible gloves, careful, distant, afraid I might crack if she got too close. After high school, I took a job at Thurman Distribution, starting out on the loading dock. 15 years later, I was a warehouse supervisor. The pay was steady, the hours long, and the air always smelled faintly of diesel and dust. Every month, I mailed Diane $500. She'd take it with that same tight smile and the same phrase every time. "You're a good son, Evan." But it always sounded rehearsed, like a line she'd practiced too many times to mean anymore. When she got sick, the cancer came fast. Pancreatic, one of those words that ends conversations. I took leave from work to drive her to chemo. Craig said he couldn't leave the garage. Lila, newly promoted to shift manager at the grocery store, said her boss would cut her hours. So, it was me, sitting in waiting rooms that smelled like bleach and fear, holding Diane's hand as clear liquid dripped into her veins. I told myself I was being a good son. The truth was, I was trying to feel like one. The morning she died, the 3 of us were crowded into her hospital room. Machines beeped and hissed while the rain tapped against the window like a clock counting down. Craig was pacing, complaining about missing hours. Lila scrolled on her phone, chewing gum. I sat beside Diane's bed, watching her chest rise and fall under the thin hospital sheet. I kept wondering why the grief felt hollow, like losing a stranger I'd known all my life. When her eyes suddenly opened, the clarity in them startled me. Her fingers, thin, cold, determined, locked around my wrist. "Evan," she whispered, voice breaking. You're not my son. I blinked, unsure if I'd heard right. Craig stopped pacing. Lila's phone slipped from her hand. I took you, Diane gasped. You were a baby. My brother's baby. Henry Harrow's. Her breath hitched, her eyes wild. You were supposed to be mine. The heart monitor shrieked. I tried to pull away, but she clung tighter. Your real name is Alexander, she said. Alexander Harrow. Then her hand fell limp. The line went flat. The nurses rushed in. Craig grabbed my shoulder and spun me around so hard I hit the wall. What the hell did she just say? His face was red, veins bulging like cables. She stole you? From who? I stammered, trying to breathe. I don't know. Lila's fingers flew across her phone screen. Henry Harrow, she said, reading. Holy crap, Craig. He owns Harrow Enterprises. Worth billions. Says here his infant son was kidnapped in 1985 and never found. She looked up at me, eyes cold and calculating. That's you. The nurse pronounced Diane dead, but no one paid attention. Craig shoved me hard into the vending machine. You're telling me Mom fed you, clothed you, worked herself into the ground for a kid that wasn't even hers? His voice cracked. You were never one of us. She raised me. I said, my throat raw. She's still my mother. Craig laughed, bitter and mean. Your mother? No, Evan. Your real mother lived in a mansion while we ate canned soup. Lila crossed her arms, still scrolling. While we were counting change for gas, your daddy was flying private jets. You think you belong here? You think you're one of us? Security ushered us out of the room, but Craig wasn't done. He pushed me down the hallway, through the elevator, out into the parking lot where the rain soaked through my shirt. Lila followed, reading from her phone. It says here Henry Harrow started a foundation to find you. Spent millions. Never gave up. She stopped, glaring. While we were broke, you were being searched for like some lost treasure. Craig's face twisted. He reached into my jacket, yanked out my wallet, and pulled the cash from inside. Call it back pay, he sneered. For 38 years of freeloading. I didn't fight. The truth had already taken everything from me. They walked away, arguing over who'd call the funeral home, leaving me standing alone in the rain. Just a man with no name, no family, and a story no one would believe. This money was for Mom's funeral, I said, reaching for the cash Craig had just yanked from my wallet. He smirked, tucking the bills into his pocket. Mom. He laughed, sharp and mean. She wasn't your mom, remember? Consider this repayment for 38 years of freeloading. He tossed my empty wallet at my chest. You should be thanking me for not calling the cops. Craig, please, I said, voice breaking. Where am I supposed to go? Not our problem, Lila said without looking up. She was already dialing someone on her phone, her tone brisk, professional. Yeah, his name's Evan Burke. Address is 424 Stockton Avenue. Yeah, fraud, identity theft, something like that. The real Evan's probably been dead for decades. This guy's some rich man's missing kid. 2 security guards appeared before I could process what she'd just said. Craig pointed at me like I was a trespasser. He's harassing us, he told them. We don't even know him. Check the hospital records. Diane Burke had 2 kids, me and my sister. This guy's been pretending to be family for years. I tried to explain, but they didn't want to hear it. The guards escorted me outside as Craig called after me. And don't think you're driving off in Dad's truck. That was Harold Burke's. You're not family, never were. When I turned back, he was dangling my keys with a grin. Truck stays with blood, he said, and tossed them into his pocket. I walked 4 miles through cold rain to my apartment, shoes squelching with every step, my mind replaying every strange look, every unfinished sentence Diane had ever given me. Her hesitation when I'd asked about baby pictures. The way she'd flinched when I got top grades. The "you look just like" that always stopped midair. When I reached my door, my landlord, Mr. Lopez, stood there with a locksmith. Evan, he said, eyes avoiding mine. Sorry, man. Got a call from Mr. Hale. Says there's a question about your identity. Can't rent to someone living under false pretenses. I've lived here 12 years, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. You've got 10 minutes, he said softly. Pack what you can. 10 minutes to erase a lifetime. I grabbed what fit. 3 shirts, a pair of jeans, my fake father's wristwatch, and the photo of Diane from last Christmas, her smile forced but familiar. I couldn't leave it. Even now, knowing what she'd done, I couldn't let go of the woman who'd raised me. By the time I reached the bank, my account was frozen. Craig had reported suspicious activity, claiming the funds were connected to a fraudulent identity. Everything was gone. That night, I ended up outside the Burke Lakefront shelter with 2 garbage bags and nowhere else to go. Nathan Bridgewater, the name I'd carried for nearly 4 decades, was dead. Maybe he'd never existed. And Alexander Harrow, the missing heir, was just a ghost in a world too far from mine to ever reach. 3 months at the shelter stripped away the last pieces of the man I'd been. The first week, I still woke at 5 a.m. out of habit, ready for a job that didn't exist anymore. By the third, I stopped setting alarms. I learned how to keep my head down, how to eat fast, how to disappear. I hauled furniture for cash when I could, cleaned out foreclosed homes that smelled like loss and mildew, swept up glass in places where no one remembered who'd lived there. My hands cracked, bled, healed, and cracked again. I learned which diners tossed edible leftovers, which churches served meals without sermons, which alleys turned dangerous after dark. Thursday started like every other. Rain, hunger, fatigue. I stood in the food line, holding a scratched plastic tray, waiting for the scoop of beans that passed for lunch. The man in front of me argued over portion size. The woman behind me swayed, her breath heavy with cheap vodka. I kept my eyes on the floor. Invisibility had become my best defense. Then someone said my name. Evan Burke. 2 men stood beside me, polished shoes, tailored suits, umbrellas still dripping from the rain. They didn't belong here. The entire line went quiet. The older one extended a card. Roger Dane, private investigator. He nodded to the man beside him, whose briefcase gleamed even in the shelter's flickering light. This is Michael Hale, estate attorney. I blinked. If this is about Craig saying I owe him money, I've got nothing left for him to take. This isn't about Craig, Hale said calmly. It's about your father. My father's dead. Your biological father, he corrected. Henry Harrow. He's been searching for you for 38 years. For a long moment, all I could hear was the hum of the fluorescent lights and the rain beating against the windows. Then Roger opened a folder and slid a document across the table, the kind of paper that changes everything. My name, Alexander James Harrow, was printed in bold ink across the top, and below it, a single sentence, heir and sole beneficiary to the Harrow estate. I stared at it, my mind struggling to catch up, my heart pounding so hard it hurt. The man I'd thought was my father had died crushed under steel. The woman who raised me had stolen me. And the father I'd never met was waiting, dying, but waiting still. The name hit me like a bucket of ice water. My grip on the tray faltered, and I set it down before I dropped it. How did you find me? I managed, my voice thin and dry. Roger Dane lifted a sealed evidence bag. Inside was a disposable coffee cup. DNA, he said simply. You tossed it outside the Euclid Avenue convenience store yesterday. We've been checking shelters, hospitals, and food lines for months. Your mother's confession made the local paper. A tiny article, page 6. But Mr. Harrow has people who never stopped watching for any mention of a missing child. Michael Hale, the attorney, adjusted his glasses. Come with us, Mr. Harrow. There's a conference room waiting at the Marriott downtown. We can talk there. I looked down at myself. Worn jeans, boots coming apart at the seams, a shirt that had survived too many wash cycles. I'm not exactly dressed for the Marriott, I muttered. Dane's expression softened. You could be wrapped in a blanket, son. You're still Henry Harrow's heir. That name again, Harrow. It felt like someone had written it in my bones without my consent. The Marriott suite was all glass and light, Lake Erie stretching out below like a mirror of gray steel. I stood by the door while Dane opened a leather case and laid its contents across the table. Birth records, photos, DNA reports. Each document peeled away another layer of the life I thought I knew. The first photo froze me. A baby with green eyes the exact shade of mine. Then a young couple, smiling. The woman's hair could have been my own reflection. The man's jawline was carved from the same stone as mine. Your father's name is Henry Harrow. Dane began quietly, sliding a recent photo forward. An old man in a hospital bed, face drawn but still commanding. He built Harrow Holdings, real estate, commercial towers, 2 entire blocks in Midtown Manhattan. The company's worth more than $2 billion. I stared, barely breathing. Your mother, Hale said, passing another photo, was Patricia Morrison Harrow. She died in a car crash in 1988. Henry never remarried. He told everyone losing you both broke him. Diane Burke, Dane continued. Was working as a housekeeper at the Harrow estate in 1985. Doctors told her she'd never carry a child after repeated miscarriages. On October 15th, during a charity gala, she took you from your crib. She'd planned every detail. Fake documents, a stolen vehicle, and a cousin in Ohio who created new identities for her and her husband. They became the Burkes. You became Evan. The words barely landed. My throat closed. She raised me. I said weakly. She did, Hale said, but she also stole your life. Your father never stopped searching. The police closed the case. The FBI moved on. But Henry kept private investigators on payroll for 38 years. He spent nearly $12 million looking for you. I stared down at the birth certificate with my true name, Alexander James Harrow, printed in neat black type. It didn't feel real. None of it did. Why now? I asked finally. Why could you find me when no one else did? Diane's deathbed confession, Dane replied. One of our analysts tracks old cases. When her name showed up connected to a stolen baby in 1985, we acted fast. Your DNA confirmed everything. Hale folded his hands. Your father's dying, Evan Alexander. Stage 4 liver cancer. The doctors say he has 2 weeks, maybe less. He wants to see his son before he goes. He wants to make things right. He slid one last document toward me. A thick will with embossed pages and an official seal. Henry Harrow's estate transfers entirely to you. Every property. Every share. You are his only heir. I shook my head. I don't know anything about real estate. I ran a warehouse. I've been living in a shelter. You've got the wrong man. Dane's voice was steady. No, Mr. Harrow. We've got the only man who matters. But there's more to your mother's story, Diane Burkes, than we understood. Something that explains why she did what she did. The words hung there like smoke as we boarded the private jet. By the time the wheels touched down at Teterboro, the sun was bleeding out over Manhattan's skyline. Through the oval window, I saw the towers, those impossible monuments of glass and willpower, rising from the city Henry Harrow had built. Dane had bought me a suit from the hotel boutique before we left Cleveland. It wasn't designer, but it was pressed and new. I caught my reflection in the jet's window, clean-shaven, decent tie, the ghost of someone respectable. But underneath it all, I was still the man who'd stood in a soup line, holding a plastic tray that never quite got clean. And somewhere between the shelter and the skyline, I'd become both, the lost son of a dying billionaire and the homeless man who wasn't sure which life truly belonged to him. The penthouse occupied the top 2 floors of a Fifth Avenue tower, its glass walls opening onto the endless green of Central Park. The elevator doors slid open straight into a marble foyer that gleamed like still water beneath crystal chandeliers. Everything smelled faintly of lilies and antiseptic. A nurse in spotless white scrubs met us before I could take another step. He's been asking for you every hour, she said quietly. He's alert, but the doctors aren't sure for how long. We followed her down a hall lined with portraits, paintings of men who all looked like variations of the one I was about to meet. The study at the end of the hall had been transformed into a hospital suite, machines softly humming beside a massive bed positioned near the windows. Manhattan stretched beyond the glass, glittering in the night like a field of distant stars. Henry Harrow looked impossibly small against the white sheets, his once powerful frame whittled down by disease. But when his eyes found me, I froze. They were the same piercing green the first saw every morning in the mirror. Alexander, he whispered, voice catching. You have your mother's eyes. I've seen them in my dreams for 38 years. I hesitated, unsure how to cross the space between us, between my life and his. He solved it by reaching out. His hand, skeletal and trembling, still held a surprising strength. Let me see you, he said, eyes bright with tears. My boy, my son. They told me you were gone, but I knew. A father knows. For an hour, he asked questions between shallow breaths, about my life, my work, the years I'd spent under Diane's roof, the homelessness that followed. He winced with every answer, as though each word added weight to the guilt pressing on his chest. I failed you, he said over and over. I should have protected you. I should have. You couldn't have known, I said softly. Diane fooled everyone. Something flickered in his eyes then. Pain, but not surprise. He turned his head toward Roger Dane. Tell him, he said. He deserves to know the whole truth. Dane opened a leather folder and laid out another stack of documents. When we dug deeper into Diane Burke's history, we found something we didn't expect. Her maiden name wasn't Wilson, like she claimed. It was Harrow. The air went still. The rhythmic hum of the medical monitors became the only sound in the room. I looked from Dane to Henry, who had closed his eyes for a moment before opening them again, wet with tears. "She was my sister," he said hoarsely. "My half-sister. My father's mistake." Dane nodded. "Your grandfather, Charles Harrow, had an affair with a housekeeper in 1955. Diane was the result. The family paid her mother to disappear. But when Diane's mother died, she found out who her father was. At 18, she came to the Harrow estate looking for acknowledgement. Instead, she got a check for $50,000 and a non-disclosure agreement." Henry's voice was bitter. "Father made her sign papers promising to stay away. But she didn't want money. She wanted legitimacy. She wanted what I had, our name. So she came back under a new identity," Michael Hale added. "She forged references, took the name Burke, and got hired as a housekeeper here. For 2 years, she worked in this very home, watching you and Patricia raise your son, watching the life she thought she'd been denied." Dane reached into the folder again and withdrew a worn leather-bound journal. "We found this in her apartment in Cleveland." He flipped to a marked page. The handwriting was tight and furious. "Henry has everything because he was born on the right side of the sheets. His son will inherit billions while my children get nothing. But if I take the boy, raise him as my own, he'll still get everything, just through me. I'll be his mother. I'll be the one he loves. The money will come home to me, where it belongs." Henry's breathing grew shallow, his grip tightening around my hand. "She didn't just steal you from me, Alexander. She stole you from her own blood. My sister raised my son and made me believe you were dead." His voice broke. "I built an empire while she hid my greatest treasure in plain sight." I swallowed hard. "What about Craig and Lila? Were they Harold's children?" Dane said. "Her husbands, from before. Diane couldn't have more kids, just as she told everyone. She married Harold to make her story look ordinary, to hide you in the middle of a family that made sense." Henry coughed suddenly, a wet, rattling sound that made the nurse rush forward, but he waved her off, his lips streaked with red. "2 things," he managed, forcing the words out. "First, I've already signed everything over to you. Every property, every account. As of this moment, you're worth $2.4 billion. Hale has the paperwork." I opened my mouth to protest, but he held up a trembling hand. "Second," he whispered, voice thin but resolute, "there's something more you need to understand about why she did what she did." He motioned for me to lean closer, his breath shallow against my ear. "Diane wasn't just stealing a life," he said. "She was trying to rewrite her own." Then his hand slipped from mine, and the monitors began to scream. Henry's hand trembled in mine, close enough that I could smell the medicine and mortality on him. His voice was faint, but his eyes, still sharp, still alive, anchored me to the moment. "Diane wrote more in that journal," he rasped. "She said there were others. Other housekeepers. Other stolen children. It wasn't just you, Alexander. It was part of something larger. Find them, bring them home." He died 2 weeks later, his fingers wrapped around mine, whispering my mother Patricia's name with his last breath. The funeral drew New York's elite, the kind of people who never stand in lines or check price tags. Cameras clicked like insects outside St. Patrick's Cathedral, and the scent of roses hung heavy in the air. I was barely keeping it together when I saw them, Craig and Lila Burke, awkward in borrowed black suits that didn't quite fit. "Brother," Craig started, voice rough with forced emotion. "We were emotional that day. Mom's death, it hit us hard." My security detail tensed, but I raised a hand. "I'm not your brother," I said quietly. "I never was." Diane made sure of that. Lila stepped forward, her tone turning syrupy. "You can't just cut us off. We raised you. We're family." I looked her straight in the eye. "You threw me out of a hospital, took my last $300, called me a fraud, a bastard. You left me to sleep on the street." Craig's face twisted, but I was already walking away. 6 months later, I stood in Henry's old office on the 82nd floor, snow falling in silent flurries over Manhattan. The skyline, once a world away, now carried my family name on 3 buildings. The leather chair behind the desk still smelled faintly of his cologne. Sometimes I turned to speak to him before remembering he wasn't there. The first thing I did with the money wasn't invest, it was repay a debt that wasn't owed. 2 checks, $50,000 each. One for Craig, one for Lila. My lawyers thought I'd lost my mind. They have no legal claim, Michael Hale protested. They treated you horribly. It's not about them, I said, signing. It's about who I decide to be. Craig cashed his check within hours, probably before the ink was dry. Lila mailed hers back in shreds, a handwritten note attached. I hope you choke on your billions. I had it framed. It hangs in my private bathroom now, a reminder that money doesn't erase bitterness. It only amplifies it. That same week, the Burke Lakefront Shelter received an anonymous donation of $10 million. I delivered it myself, wearing the same jacket I'd worn the day Roger Dane found me in their food line. Mrs. Holstead, the director who'd slipped me extra blankets on cold nights, recognized me instantly. Evan, she gasped, then caught herself. I'm sorry. I heard everything. Alexander, right? Nathan's fine, I said, smiling faintly. Nathan was the man you helped when he had nothing. Alexander just signs the checks. When she saw the donation amount, her hands flew to her mouth. This will keep us open for 20 years. We can build job programs, expand medical support. Good, I said, because I'm going to need your help for something bigger. 3 months later, the Patricia Harrow Foundation opened its doors with a $100 million endowment. Its mission, to find and reunite the other children Diane's journals had hinted at, children stolen by a shadow network of housekeepers and nannies during the 1980s. Roger Dane, now the foundation's director, stood before our board at the first meeting, his tone grim. Between 1980 and 1990, 17 high-profile families reported kidnapped infants who were never found. In 12 of those cases, a housekeeper or nanny disappeared around the same time. Diane's journal names 3 women, Linda, Susan, and Marie. We believe they were working together. The first breakthrough came 8 months later. A man in Detroit named Michael Thompson discovered he was actually Michael Pearson, the heir to a pharmaceutical dynasty. His kidnapper, Linda, had died years earlier, but his biological father was still alive. Their reunion made national headlines. The 2 men standing together, one weeping, one trembling with disbelief. The second case was even harder. Susan had raised her daughter, Jennifer, in a small Kentucky town, scraping by in poverty, while Jennifer's real parents spent decades searching. Their reunion was televised. The tears, the trembling hands, the unbearable silence between 2 mothers. The biological one who'd lost, and the one who'd lied. But it was the third case that broke me. Marie hadn't just stolen a baby. She'd built an empire of her own on the lie. An entire life spun from the same darkness that had taken mine. And finding her meant digging into the one place I thought I'd already escaped, the past Diane Burke left behind. She hadn't just taken one baby, she'd taken twins. Sold one to a desperate couple in Canada, then raised the other as her own in a modest home in Phoenix. Those twins were 29 when we found them. 2 lives running side by side, separated by a few miles and a lifetime of lies. They'd grown up attending rival schools, shopping at the same grocery store, passing each other in traffic without knowing they were looking into a mirror of what might have been. When they finally met, there were no words, just the kind of silence that comes when truth crashes through years of fiction. 14 months after Henry's death, Craig tried to sue me. He claimed emotional damages, $50 million for the supposed trauma Diane's deception caused him. The judge dismissed it almost instantly. After that, his letters came in waves, some threatening, others pitiful, until Michael Hale secured a restraining order. Lila didn't bother with letters. She vanished into the Florida suburbs, reinventing herself under a new last name, telling neighbors her brother had died years ago. Through all of it, I kept Diane's photo, the one I'd snatched from the wreckage of my old apartment that night everything changed. I didn't keep it out of love or nostalgia. I kept it as evidence. Proof of how far greed can reach when conscience gives way. She'd stolen me from my family, from a father who never stopped searching, from a mother who never got to see her son grow up. But in her twisted way, she'd also given me something invaluable. Because I'd lived her version of poverty and Henry's world of privilege, I understood both sides. The desperation that breeds crime, and the arrogance that believes money fixes it. Every decision I make now, every dollar donated, every family reunited, comes from knowing what it feels like to be both invisible and untouchable. I've been the man sleeping in a shelter line and the one signing checks with a fountain pen worth more than his first car. I've been Evan Burke and Alexander James Harrow. Somewhere between those two names lives the truth of who I am. From the penthouse office where snow still gathers on the glass like falling ash, I look out at the city Henry built and realize what Diane never could. Family isn't built from bloodlines or bank accounts. It's the people you choose when hate would be easier. It's the decision to rebuild instead of retaliate. To chase truth even when it burns. The Harrow Foundation has now located 43 missing children, each one a thread pulled from a knot of greed and neglect. Some reunions overflow with tears and joy. Others reopen old wounds. But every single one matters. Each child returned to their family is a small restoration of what Diane and her accomplices destroyed. Henry searched 38 years for his son and found me only to say goodbye. Now I search for others, hoping they get more time than we did. Sometimes I dream of Diane. In those dreams, I ask her if it was worth it. Did stealing me fill that hunger for recognition? Did raising her brother's son erase the bitterness that lived in her bones? She never answers. She just stares, eyes hollow, haunted, like she's seeing Henry every time she looks at me. Maybe she was. The 7 words that unraveled my entire life still echo. Diane Burke was Henry Harrow's sister. 7 words that exposed decades of lies. 7 words that proved blood doesn't guarantee love. It only guarantees the capacity for betrayal. My name is Alexander James Harrow III. I was stolen as a newborn by my aunt, raised in struggle while my father searched the world for me. I found him only in time to hold his hand as he left this world. But I'm also Evan Burke, the warehouse worker who held his dying mother's hand while she confessed the unthinkable. I carry both names. I am both and neither. Rich and poor, found and still a little lost. The wealth Henry left behind isn't mine to hoard. It belongs to every child still missing, every parent who refuses to give up. I'm just the caretaker of a legacy built from pain, meant to heal what greed broke. Diane stole a fortune that was never hers. I spend it to rebuild lives like mine, one recovered child at a time. And maybe, just maybe, that makes those 38 stolen years mean something. If this story reminded you that truth has a price, but redemption has value, share it. Because somewhere, a parent is still searching, a child is still waiting, and the line between what we lose and what we find is thinner than we ever imagined. Sometimes, the family that never stopped looking for you is worth more than the one that raised you on lies.